I'd like to show you how to import your own images into a nib in Aleph Null 3.0. Now, first of all, you need to know that most of the nibs do support this. There's three types of nibs. There are the image nibs, and they generally have a bitmap on them to indicate that they are indeed image nibs. And these image nibs process bitmaps. They chew on a folder of bitmaps. And all of them do support importing your own images for Aleph Null to chew on. Secondly, there are these sorts of nibs that I call color music nibs. And these do not chew on bitmaps. They don't sample images. They use complex gradients as their paint. And so you can't import your own images into them because they don't use images at all. And they generally have this sort of vector-based image as their image on their nib icon. And then there's this one, which is in development. It's a video nib, and when it's ready, you'll be able to import a folder of videos for Aleph Null to chew on. But it's in the early stages of development, and it's not working particularly well at this point. So anyway, back to the image nibs and how to import your own images into them. Well, let's fire one up. I'm going to use this one since I created this one. By default, each of these nib icons uses a particular set of images. Like this one uses fantastic images by Chris Joseph concerning Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. And this one uses images by the incredibly strong artist Ted Warnell. And this one uses the fantastic visual poetry of Jim Leftwich. This one is the terrific art of the Rio-based artist Regina Celia Pinto. You can see the art associated with a particular nib. If you mouse over the nib, you can see that there's some help that appears at the bottom of the control panel. So anyway, how do you use your own images on these if you want? Well, you click once to get the nib going. We've got the Trump nib going. The Trump nib is actually called the moral deformity of Team Trump, and it's chewing on 230 images of Trump and his accomplices. Anyway, you click on the icon again, and that raises the Nib Options window, which has some interesting possibilities for you in it, chief of which is this button, Choose Files. Actually, you choose a folder. So when I click that, you get some sort of system window that lets you choose a folder of images. I'll just choose these ones, Kandinsky images. These are images that an earlier graphic synthesizer called DB Cinema created, chewing on paintings by Vasily Kandinsky, the great abstract artist. So 40 files. It's chewing on them. That is how you import your own images. Simple as that. The images can be JPEGs, GIFs, and PNGs. So what else do we have in this window for you to play with? Well, how to stretch the underlying images. What are the options here? Cover, contain, and none. So by default, what Aleph Null does is it'll take one of these 40 images, and then it'll make it cover the entire browser window. It'll stretch it proportionally so that it covers the entire browser window. Now, if you don't want it to do that, you have some options. Contain is a bit different. What does it do? Well, it makes it so that each of the images that we've imported will be fully contained in the browser window. So you can see that you have the outline now of the images. They're fully contained. And when you select contain, a bunch of other sliders pop up that let you adjust the margins of these images. So like, for instance, say I change the left margin to -142. Okay, so are we going to see any sort of difference? Well, no, we're not, because the X alignment is still center. So if I change the X alignment to left, then now we can see a change starting to occur, so that this image is now left aligned. So you can see that the edge is now here rather than over here. So if you want these to work, you need to change the X alignment or the Y alignment from center to something else. You've got center, left, right, and random for the X alignment, and for the Y alignment you've got center, top, bottom, or random. So getting back to this, we've seen what cover does, we've seen what contain does. None, what does that do? That makes it so that the images are not stretched at all. So they will be drawn at their natural, which is a funny word in this context, size. Okay. What's the sample order of the images? Random or alphabetical? Well, Aleph Null samples from those 40 images. And the question is, what order does it sample those images in? Random order samples them in a random order. Alphabetical will sample image 1 and then image 2 and then image 3 and then image 4, etc. Or whatever the alphabetical order is of the images. Okay, what other things do we have to play with here? Well, I'm going to change this back to cover, in which case we don't have the X alignment and margins to play with, but that's fine. I generally like the cover setting myself here. Now what's this? This is quite an interesting slider. This is labeled ms per image, milliseconds per image. And of course there are 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. Milliseconds per image. Currently it's set to 22.9 seconds per image. So that is, it will sample a particular image for 22.9 seconds before moving on to another image. And so you see that basically what we have right now is a glorified slideshow, because it samples the image long enough that it basically draws the whole image on the screen for 22.9 seconds and then moves on to the next one. So with Aleph Null, you generally want this to be fairly low. You don't want this to be too low. Like right now, it's trying to change the underlying image every 5 milliseconds, which must be a lot of work for it. It must be getting tired. So this is a more reasonable sort of a setting for this. We've got this set at 34 milliseconds per image, which gives it basically, it changes it 30 times per second. If I change that to 49, then it's still changing it a whole lot. So this is one of the things that helps you control the speed of Aleph Null, because this is how often it's changing the underlying image that is sampled from. Okay, so what's this? This is the hardness of the circle. So we see that the brush strokes for this particular nib are circles. Well, if I bring this all the way up, then these circles are, as they're called in Photoshop, if the edges are sharp, fully opaque, then that's called a hard edge. So these are hard-edged circles, whereas if I bring the hardness of the circle down to 0, then you get this blending effect, which is kind of nice. So in this blending effect, you have a fully opaque center of the circle, and then as you head out towards the edge of the circle, the opacity goes to 0. Okay, border type at edge of browser. Well, this affects what the edge of the browser looks like. So if I change it to Dream, and then I refresh the screen, then what we're going to see is that it never reaches the edge of the browser, but instead gives it a kind of a thought bubble-ish kind of a border, which we would see if we sat here and waited for it for a minute. But we're not going to do that because everybody is so busy. So anyway, that is how to import your own images into the image nibs of Aleph Null and use the other controls in the Nib Options window. Thanks for tuning in.